Hey everybody, it's the waitingfornextyear.com podcast. This time I'm not talking to myself in my automobile while I'm driving around. Jeff is on the line. How's it going, Jeff?
Good. We missed last week, but I thought it was important to do this week so everybody didn't think I pulled a Vontae Davis or something.
How cool was that story?
It's the greatest thing.
Vontae Davis retires in the middle of a game, but not just any game, a game involving the team that might challenge the Browns and go 0-16. Could we have two teams go 0-16 in back-to-back years?
Ooh, that would be interesting. Like a tank-off? How do they decide?
This is an even worse tank-off because they presumably have their quarterback.
That's very true. Man, tank-off sounds like a dirty phrase. I'm going to be honest. I don't feel comfortable saying that.
But, I mean, there's a very real possibility that this Bills team is that historically bad. I mean, a player retiring in the middle of Game 2 rivals any bit of news that the Browns put off last year.
Which is impressive. Like, that's a feat in itself.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking today, the Browns might be the most impressive thing in all of pro sports.
You really think so? Or do you think that we just have that proximity bias?
I don't know. I feel like I follow a lot of sports, and nobody is this just consistently Brownsian at all. Like that. Like there's other teams that are bad, and they go through spells of being terrible and a joke, but just the consistency with which the Browns is just. It's like I was watching that game on Sunday, and it's just amazing. Like you're almost just impressed at a certain point.
Yes. And that's one of the most popular posts in the history of Waiting for Next Year, where we break down or go through all the unbelievable ways. I mean, and you think nothing could top Dwayne Rudd.
Like, I didn't even think this week was like on the list. I saw, Waiting for Next Year alum Ben Cox talking about has this ever happened before? Like, yeah, a Browns kicker missed 3 field goals one time and a game winner, and they ended up losing. Like, even this wasn't unprecedented. It was more extreme than that, but it was still just kind of an extension of a crazy Brownsian thing that we'd actually already seen. Like we're seeing Browns reruns now.
So I need a sanity check on my feelings about the team and their situation and the coaching staff and everything else. Like I can't honestly vouch for Hugh Jackson in his career or anything, but they did let him come back. They have decided to go with him for this season, and I fail to see anything in the last 2 weeks that I can specifically point at Hugh Jackson and say, man, that dumbass cost us a game.
No, I agree with that. And Todd Haley was supposed to fix a lot of things, on the offense, and it still seems like there's some issues there. So it's one of the things that you wanted to get mad at him for before, even with more talent now, there's still a lot of, they're not doing the things that everybody wanted them to do. They're not getting Duke Johnson involved, and they're not, finding Njoku a bunch and stuff. So, even the things that I think were kind of on Hugh's shoulders before seem to be continuing, even when he's kind of been stripped of that duty. So that's kind of interesting.
For all the analysis that we do and all the ways that we look at NFL football, really the only thing that actually matters is whether they win or lose. That's as simplistic as it is for most people, because what passes for analysis is usually just citing Hugh Jackson's two-year record plus 2 games in 2018.
I love quoting Hugh's record because it's quoted as a good thing when we talk about Sashi and accumulating assets and getting Baker and getting Myles Garrett. But it's then quoted as a bad thing when we talk about Hugh Jackson. Like, we all acknowledge that the plan was to lose games, but then we're also like, yes, but also Hugh lost a lot of games. It's like, well, is that a good thing or a bad thing right now? I can't. It depends on who we're talking about, whether it's good that they lost games. It's like an impossible conversation to have because that entire era was just so skewed on what was good and what was bad for the Browns at that time.
It's just so interesting to me that you could look at the first 2 games of this Browns season where they were not favored in either one against 2 undoubtedly superior opponents with Hall of Fame level quarterbacks, and decide that after a tie and a loss that Hugh Jackson now is the moment he needs to be fired, because that record now is just...
And I said it as mostly a troll after the game in week 1, but like the locker room's clearly not quitting on him. I mean, they had every reason to roll over in that Pittsburgh game and give up. crappy weather, down by a million, not a million, but down by a couple scores, bad weather, superior opponent, and they kept fighting, they kept rallying, and you're kind of seeing that these guys don't quit. So it is kind of the stupid things that we normally judge coaches on, like, oh, lost the locker room, or those kind of things. I think those are hard to point to this year, and so you have to try to find other reasons. And to your point, I don't think there are those obvious other reasons right now.
Which brings us to maybe the most important game. Like, it's the idea that the most important election of our lifetime. This Browns game on Thursday against the Jets might be the most important game of our lifetime, like, in so many ways, because it for all the things that I say about the first two games and the Hall of Fame quarterbacks and the fact that the Browns weren't favored. The Browns are favored, I think, by 4.5 or something. Like 3.5 points, something like that, this Thursday against the Jets.
And it's totally one of those games where, to your point, if you lose, like, it shouldn't be that big of a deal, right? They've gone 1-31. Like, losing another game, like, it really shouldn't matter at all. But it feels like one of those where it's going to set the tone, like the narratives are going to be built. And they lose this one, and all of a sudden there's all this pressure, and people are furious, and the calls for Baker and for Hughes to be fired and all those kind of things are just going to get louder and louder and louder. So yeah, it does kind of feel like it's a bad game for it to happen, because Thursday night games are just so incredibly random.
There are legitimately people out there who think that either one, they think Hugh Jackson could be fired if they lose to the Jets, and then there are people who think he should be fired if they lose to the Jets. Like, it all comes down to this one game.
And it's week 3. It's so hard. It's like, if they were going to fire him after week 3, then they should have just never brought him back.
Yeah.
And, I mean, who knows with them, but that just seems crazy to me.
So the Dolphins, your team, played the Jets. You were giving us a bit of a scouting report behind the scenes and waiting for next year. So
time to check out the all-22 yet, but
let's give the scouting report to everybody else, because I mean, I've seen a couple of highlights of Sam Darnold, but it's very different seeing a couple highlights than actually watching a guy run 3 or 4 drives as they happen.
Yeah, and I hate the Jets. I mean, they're like, I went through a phase of my life like when I saw people in Jets clothes and like jerseys, I would like go out of my way to talk to them and make them like sure that they knew that I hated the Jets too. Like, I was that kind of sports fan for a while. It's kind of like you guys with the Steelers. Like, you just hate that team so much. But man, Darnold looks really good, and it's frustrating. He had a couple of picks that kind of helped the Dolphins pull that one out, and he's going to make those mistakes. But he looks really good. He looks like he's going to be a very good NFL quarterback. So I wouldn't go into it expecting him to be, tentative and scared to sling the ball around and not able to do things. He'll make mistakes, but he definitely was putting the team up for some drives there for a while. So he was really good. But the Dolphins were getting a lot of pressure on him, which was good. And I'd say, the Browns have quite a bit of talent on the defensive line. The Dolphins have a decent amount of talent on theirs. So, fairly similar in that regard. So I would think that there would be some success had there. Garrett was kind of quiet this week, so maybe he can have a big week or something like that. I know Robert Quinn was having a field day getting pressures and things like that. So on offense, that's kind of what my expectation would be. Don't let Darnold have too much time, because he looks better than I was expecting.
Well, if there's one thing that I think is safe to predict, it's that the Browns will not give Darnold too much time, because Greg Williams has really been, his defense has just been on fire. And yeah, it comes down to talent, and Denzel Ward had a bonkers first game in the NFL, and Myles Garrett looks like the guy that they drafted number 1 overall and wanted him to be when they drafted him there. I don't think there's even any way to well, I'm not even going to say it. I was going to say there's no way to even jinx it. It's just like...
And Ogunjobi just looks great. I mean, he looks like a stud too. So yeah, I agree. That defensive line looks like a serious weapon. And the Dolphins were getting pressure. They were getting pressure on the edge and in the middle. They don't have superstar defensive tackles by any means after getting rid of Sue, but they were consistently getting pressure with a couple of different guys up the middle. So I do think that there'll be some success there. On the other side, the Dolphins were running the ball really well on them. And we're not like a great running team. We pretty much designed our offensive line to pass block because Tannehill got sacked so much the first couple of years. We were just sick of it and kind of built the roster for him to not die. Because We went through that last year, and when your quarterback dies, you get Jay Cutler, and that's not fun for anybody. But they were definitely running the ball in the Jets fairly well. They were getting guys open and getting guys open with space. A lot of underneath stuff and with guys with space to run. I think it's definitely a winnable game. It's a Thursday game, and those are so random. You just don't know what's going to happen.
They really are random, and the Browns. I think everybody expected their offense to be behind the defense, but they just. Even to be, they might never be a great offense, but even to become the best offense that they can be, they need another 2, 3, 4 weeks maybe to play together. At least that's the way it feels. They feel not finished yet, not done, not properly baked in the oven or something.
The Tyrod thing is mind blowing to me because as a Dolphins fan, I watched him and he just terrorized the Dolphins for years. They just could not beat that guy, and he just doesn't look like the same guy.
He hasn't gotten out running much yet.
No. Oh, and that was the other thing I wanted to say. Tannehill had more rushing yards than the entire Jets team on Sunday, and there were a bunch of designed runs, and that was killing him. It was like they'd never seen a quarterback run. It was like we were breaking the rules or something every time. So Tyrod should have success. They were designed runs. It's not like he was scrambling. They were designed plays. So I'd love to see the Browns get Tyrod out doing that because he's clearly a superior runner to Tannehill. Even though Tannehill's a wide receiver in college, and you literally are legally contracted to say that if you talk about Tannehill for any length of time.
Did you know?
It's like you have to use Jason Tatum's age whenever you talk about Jason Tatum. So yeah, they had a lot of success there. So I'll be interested. But it just doesn't seem like Tyrod is like comfortable, or like it's just like the pieces don't quite mesh up together because he should be exactly what they need. Like I watched him. He should be that exactly average quarterback that can make things happen, with his legs. And I think the running has been there a little bit. He seems to have bailed out. Like that seems to be the only thing working for the offense right now. Is like Tyrod's legs have bailed them out of some situations, but he just doesn't seem comfortable.
Well, and this is part of the reason why I think when you really get into the Baker Mayfield conversation, I think anybody needs to kind of have a feeling out period with their teammates, and here. He's going to start this game, and it's the third game, but it's the second time he'll be heading into a week game planning with these receivers, and actually maybe the first time because Josh Gordon was probably in the plans for last week for most of the week. It just the NFL they don't use the preseason the way they used to, and most teams aren't ready at the end of preseason. They're still feeling each other out in the first few weeks of the season, and I question Browns fans' memory. They seem to think that this offense as it looks today is done and worth giving up on.
Yeah, and everybody wants Baker, but I do think Tyrod's able to move around in the pocket. He's able to escape. He's able to do some things, and until that line kind of solidifies a little bit and you figure out what you're going to do there, because it still seemed like he was getting pressure, and it still seemed like even if he wasn't taking sacks, he was still, things were collapsing around him and he was having to dance quite a bit. So do you want to put the rookie into all that? Do you want to have him taking hits and doing that right away, having to process even faster than what you normally have to process because the defense is bearing down on you, and if they know there's a rookie behind there, they're going to be sending even more pressure. So like that kind of scares me, and I agree that give them a little bit of time, try to establish a running game. It doesn't seem that they've had that a ton, and get the offense just kind of humming a little bit because they should all settle in. They've got enough guys on that side that have talent that they should settle in.
Yeah, and that bomb that Antonio Callaway caught in the back of the end zone is, if the Browns had somehow found a way to win that game, can you imagine how much we'd be talking about that play?
At what point did you think he actually could catch it? Like when it left Tyrod's hands, I thought there was no chance.
Not until then, he took off at about the 5-yard line.
Like I didn't think he was going to get to it until it literally touched his hands. Like that. Like I was shocked. Like every step he took, I was like, well, maybe okay. But it wasn't until it got there that I was like, holy cow! How did he get under that thing?
Yeah,
it looked like he overthrew it by a mile.
It looked post-human.
It was crazy. That was exciting for Browns fans, especially with the Gordon thing going on. That is exciting.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing.
So when do you want to see Baker? 'Cause, like, I get why Browns fans want it, but you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube after that, and it scares me so much.
Yeah, you really can't. I agree with I can't remember which one of my friends said that they want to see him for 8 games. That sounds about right to me.
Yeah, that's been Mike Hattery waiting for next year. I think he's been saying that quite a bit too. Is that
it must have been Mike.
You want half a season of it, and yeah, I get that. It scares me because you're really excited about him, but if he comes out and doesn't look like the Baker Mayfield you've designed in your head at this point, you just can't go back. And
I'm very confident in Baker Mayfield. I want this offense to get 4 to 6 weeks playing together first, especially the offensive line.
Well, and to your point about this being such a big game, that you don't want that pressure if they lose this game to be mounting on Baker instead of just on Tyrod Taylor.
I mean, you see what it did to that mediocre kicker.
But right?
Yeah.
You don't want to get in a situation where he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders along with trying to be a rookie quarterback. And I mean, he's got the demeanor to probably handle it and it'll be fine. But it still is a lot to ask and probably not the best situation to put your rookie in.
It'd be so much better if they were 2-6 and looking awful.
Like the season is lost, but you've got your win or 2 wins, and you're not talking about being historically bad anymore. Nobody's quoting like your record over the last couple of years. And like that's the perfect situation for a rookie, right? There's just no pressure at all.
Yeah, when the Browns are 1-4-1, I want to see Baker Mayfield.
That tie is so annoying.
It's going to throw me off all year long. In the weirdest way, it makes the math really hard. You have to like think really hard. It breaks your brain because you're not used to thinking 3 columns for NFL football.
We can say any 2 numbers and they'll add up to 16, like as fast as we want. But you add that 1 at the end, it just throws us off.
Meanwhile, international soccer fans and hockey fans think we're all dopes.
We're going to have to make flashcards, like Brown's flashcards, so that people can quote records really quickly. We have to relearn math.
NHL fans are going, oh, I don't know how many points it is.
That was pretty good. That was a pretty good off-the-cuff Canadian impression. I'm going to be honest.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's also my impression of Minnesota. So, I'm sure that's offensive somewhere. All right, I saw an article while I was getting ready to dial you up that made me laugh a little bit, and it's also going to get me in trouble if my wife ever looks at my search history. Apparently, Fortnite has been cited in over 200 divorce cases in the UK in 2018.
Oh my god!
And now it was a press release type stat from a company, an online divorce website. Which then I went and looked up, so my wife is going to think I'm looking at online divorces. But so there might not be a lot of truth to it, but having seen some of my friends, the way they take to Fortnite and seeing some of the videos of people losing their minds playing Fortnite, I kind of almost buy it.
Do you play?
I've tried it a couple times, but no, I don't play.
I've tried it. I downloaded it. And I was just so bad. Like it wasn't worth me playing anymore. The first time I dropped, I killed somebody. You know, I was like, wow, that person has to feel so dumb. Like I've never played, so I don't know what I'm doing at all. And then after that, it was just a disaster. Like 20 times after that, just kind of running around until somebody found me, and then it was over. So
I played like 3 or 4 times, and then I saw these people like building structures out of thin air, and I'm like, yeah, my old man brain can't deal with this.
Yeah, it's funny. That's the part that's more daunting to me. Like, if it was just learning how to fight, I feel like I could sit there and like try hard enough to be okay.
But
you add that building
Doom
thing,
and Quake and Call of Duty. I can play those games, but this idea that it's also Minecraft, I'm like, no.
For some reason it creates a mental block where it's like, all right, that's too much. Like I can learn the one thing, but I can't learn the other thing. That's too much. You're asking too much of me. I cannot walk and chew bubble gum. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous to ask.
I don't understand how this is the one that became the game.
Yeah, why it's so much better than anything else.
Or why somebody hasn't just released a patch for Call of Duty, which I think is a far superior game.
Yeah, it's like the same thing that you and I complain about Twitter every week and nobody's just come out with a better version of Twitter to to get everybody on it. It's probably just one of those that whoever strike first got the audience, and then they just kept going.
I kind of, but at the same time, video games come out and replace each other all the time. Social
True.
networks don't do that, and social media networks don't do that all the time. That's why I'm just so surprised.
Is it because it's free?
I'm sure that's part of it. The fact that it's on every single platform, including phones. I can't even imagine playing a game like that on my phone.
No, that seems crazy. That doesn't seem fun at all, especially because doesn't it you keep like stats and stuff?
Yeah.
I don't like games that keep stats. I get too obsessed with that.
See, I'm okay with that. Anyway, it's interesting to me. I'm also now trying to envision the scenario where it's led to a divorce. I mean, I guess it's probably just a husband who can't put it down and a wife going, all right, enough of this.
Yeah, I was the guy who was sitting in the dark in our bedroom after my wife had gone to sleep, like sneaking, playing some more NBA 2K19 on my Switch the other night. So I see how it could happen.
Is that grounds for divorce now? Because
more just that I just ignore any other duties I could possibly have. I'm just sitting there staring at the screen.
On the next Waiting for Next Year podcast.
Just marriage counseling.
She's stuck with you through the Twitter thing. I think she
That's
can
true.
survive NBA 2K.
That's very true.
So how amped are you? I think we've talked about this before, but I can't. I was talking about NBA on the day after the Browns game. After 5 minutes of Browns talk, I was talking to my brother about the NBA and how excited I am to watch these upstart Cavaliers with Kevin Love and Colin Sexton, and just how great it's going to be to have an up and coming team again.
I'm already lying to myself and being like, all right, I'm not gonna bail out when, they look terrible and we have these huge expectations. We were all talking about how fun this season's going to be, and then like we kind of realize about 2 months in that it's like going to be really bad. Like I'm trying to convince myself I'm not going to let that happen. But I am psyched to see the young guys. Like to your point, we haven't gotten to do the young guys develop thing. Like we kind of got that stolen from us. Like as much fun as it is for LeBron to come back. And obviously I wouldn't change that for anything, but we had this, like all these young guys, and it felt like that was all kind of just like the carpet yanked out on it. Just like, all right, we're doing the vets now. And like, I get why people had so much trouble with the Andrew Wiggins trade because of that, because rebuilds are fun and it's fun to watch a guy come up more than it is to trade for, Kevin Love's one of us now, but when we traded for him, he was, felt like somebody else's star, and we're just kind of renting him. So that does get hard. So it will be fun to watch some of these young guys come up.
But the problem is, after the novelty of that wears off, all of a sudden you realize, oh yeah, there's really no point.
Yeah, when we're staring at 25, 30 wins for the year, and it's January, and Kevin Love's got his typical 10 to 15 game injury and all that. Like, are we going to be talking about it on this podcast, or are we going to be pretending like they don't exist?
Yeah, I think it'll be more of the latter. So, what did you make of kind of the Twitter rumblings that Kevin Durant's basically going to be a Laker next year?
It wouldn't shock me.
Right?
I mean, like, we all saw the parade, like those couple of highlights from the parade where even the Golden State people were kind of like nervously trying to make jokes about it. Like, we're not worried about this, and like, it's pretty clear that if they're worried about it, then everybody should be thinking it, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
The question is, where can he go? All right, so the whole thing is he went there to win rings and, kind of piggyback on what they had going for the surefire rings. So where does he go to like shed that? Can he go to LA with LeBron? Can you go from teaming up with a 73-win team to teaming up with LeBron and tear back your own narrative?
Because you're thinking about it wrong.
Uh-oh.
The narrative is pretend. You're making that up. These guys obviously don't care about any of the narratives any of us ever think they care about. Ever. Ever, 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 ever.
Even Kevin Durant? I feel like of anyone, Kevin Durant would be one that kind of does. The burner account guy.
You will mold it at the end to find a way to justify some new pretend narrative that you hadn't thought of that makes sense after he goes to LA. He does not care. He does not care. He's never cared. Is he staying in California because he's got his investments in the tech sector? None of it makes any sense.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I've given up trying to predict what these guys are going to do. It's like the Kyrie Irving thing. There's a lot of
I was
rumblings that he
convinced
might leave
LeBron was
Boston.
going to stay here because he wanted his kids to go to St. Vincent St. Mary. What do I know? Nothing.
And like I said, the Kyrie Boston one is like the most interesting because trying to guess what Kyrie's going to do is just that doesn't make any sense. Like you're not getting anywhere trying to get inside of Kyrie's brain. So I think that's probably the most fun one for me to watch.
Yeah, you have to wait and see what he hears while he's in a sweat lodge.
But that one will be super. But that's kind of fun because the entire landscape of the NBA could change if Durant leaves Golden State and if Kyrie leaves Boston. Like right now, it feels like those two teams are positioned to be the only teams that matter for a while. But that could upend everything.
Yeah, it really could. It really could. I'm also not convinced that anyone's going to actually follow LeBron to LA. Nobody's ever actually followed LeBron. He got his friends, they all went together to Miami, but they didn't follow LeBron. LeBron went to Miami, and Bosch followed. But where else? Where else have they all followed him along? I mean, I guess you could technically say the Cavs traded for Kevin Love, and he followed along because he obviously re-signed after being traded here. But he's never been the Pied Piper. Nobody's ever really followed him anywhere.
And he's also at a really strange point in his career where he's so much older than anyone else that's at his level of talent that it's got to be really hard for a superstar who's late 20s or even 30 to want to sign up for the next 5 years or 4 years of their career with LeBron at age 34, 35, whatever he's going to be by the time these guys start trying to go there. Right?
Well, how much of that is the Kyrie Irving's thing?
Yeah, like Kyrie didn't want to line up for that. I know. I just think that's going to be interesting. Is who wants to sign up for LeBron's decline and being the guy to ride along with that? Because guess who's going to take the blame for it? It's not going to be LeBron.
No, he's really not.
He's indestructible at this point.
Yeah, he's absolutely indestructible. There's his legacy is so secure. The only ones at this point who have any argument, and they're getting so old and doddering they don't matter anymore, the Michael Jordan quote unquote stans. I'm not young enough to use the word stan without putting it in quotes first.
The stans thing is so strange. Like people who just spend all day defending that some certain player. Like it's just such a different idea of like sports fandom that I have in any way.
It's not unique to the NBA, but it's most prevalent in the NBA.
Oh yeah, for sure. But there's people who just all day will defend Kobe or Jordan or even like lower level guys. And no matter what team they go to, they just follow them to those teams, and it doesn't matter. And that's just such like a foreign concept. I mean, it's fine to follow a guy around, but dedicating so much of your life to defending them online. I mean, I do that for my team, so I guess I shouldn't talk. But that seems to make more sense in my brain.
So were you in on the conversation about the Patriots and Tom Brady and all that stuff today?
Yes. Yeah, I think I started. I was the one who said, oh, you mean on Slack?
Yes.
And the secret waiting for next year. Yeah, I was the one who said that they get all this credit for drafting and trades and reclamation projects and all this, but I just think it's a system and it's Brady. And like the other stuff we just project on them because it's the only way we can understand the Patriots.
So, and that's where I launched my hot take of all hot takes, that if you're going to give the Patriots and Bill Belichick all this credit for quote unquote rings, then it kind of negates some of the Tom Brady legacy as the greatest quarterback of all time. You don't get to use rings and give partial credit to maybe the greatest coach of all time and then just say, no, he's the greatest quarterback of all time because he won the most rings, when somebody like, and this is where it gets hot takey, but Peyton Manning has the most touchdowns and I think probably still has the most yards and has the most quarterback stats. He never had the Belichick.
Right. I mean, you're talking to a Dolphins fan, so if you want to talk about not using rings to judge quarterbacks, I'm clearly going to be on board with this. But I do think that in the NFL, more than any other, or more than at least basketball, it takes so much more than just a good quarterback is, 70% of it, but you still need that other part. And Brady's gotten the other part and then some on every season.
Wait, what do you? I'm sorry. What's he gotten?
He's gotten the other part. He's gotten the coaching and
Oh, yes.
the system around him and everything going on. Like he's had everything else has been part. It's kind of like Joe Montana. Like Joe Montana was a good quarterback, but he had everything else working for him, and that's what made him all those rings and be as famous as he is.
Yeah, and I always bring it up, and I'm sure people are just gonna, it's just Craig with his sour grapes. But Tom Brady won a Super Bowl sitting on the sidelines with the most improbable interception I think I've ever seen in my entire life. So,
Right.
He won the Super Bowl, but he wasn't even on the field that determined the fate. It's like that's just emblematic. And I'm not trying to take everything away from Tom Brady. It's just it's a phenomenal story about the Patriots and the coach and the system and everything else. I just don't understand how we keep separating each of them and giving individual credit to all these different people just in a way to nullify everybody else who's ever been good because they didn't have a perfect 53-man roster the majority of the seasons they played.
It's interesting the way we talk about them compared to Duncan and Popovich, where those guys get all the credit in the world and all the praise, but we don't compare them to others nearly as much. Like we just understand that both of those guys are great and we love that, but we don't try to shove it down the face of fans of other teams or players. Does that make sense?
Yes. Like in my soul, if I'm picking an all-time 2-on-2 team, I would pick Kevin Garnett over Tim Duncan, even though Tim Duncan had the better career, was the better player long term, everything else. Just something about it. But it never occurs to me to try and negate Tim Duncan with Kevin Garnett or vice versa. But
right.
With quarterbacks, we do it all the time.
Right. It's a competition. If somebody is good, that means somebody else has to be not as good, and we have to define that and say who that is. Like we can't just celebrate anybody.
And this, of course, was all part of the Josh Gordon conversation because there's this dumb wave of chatter going, oh, yeah, that makes tons of sense that Josh Gordon goes there. I'm sure they'll get the most out of him.
Yeah, and I was getting I said it on Twitter, all right, name all these guys, because the Patriots constantly pick up former first-rounders. I mean, especially at receiver. But name all these guys these reclamation projects that have turned out for them. It's Randy Moss 10 or 11 years ago. And I was asking,
and Randy Moss wasn't a reclamation project. They just had to convince him to stop quitting on his team like he did in previous stops.
Right. And people kept pointing out Corey Dillon. Corey Dillon rushed for 1,600 yards for the Patriots in 2004. Like, that's a long time ago. And, it's the same coach, but, that's a long time ago. I don't
Corey
think
Dillon was really good for the Bengals.
Right. They traded a second-rounder to get him. I mean, it's one of those where so much has happened between then. You can't act like this is some pattern that, of course, they're going to get the most out of Gordon. He's going to buy into what they're doing. I mean, they do have a strong culture and all of that, but I don't think that we can look at their past and just say, oh yeah, look at all this. The Patriots have done this all over the place.
No, they have just as many failures. It was like, Chad Ochocinco. He never made it out of training camp, I don't think. Albert Hainsworth.
Right.
Everybody was like, oh, here he goes. He's going to get the most out of this guy.
It just never matters. And so I think we just prematurely do that. And he might be great. In fact, I would almost be more surprised if he didn't have a couple of big games there. I just don't think it's going to be a long-term thing. I just from what we know of Josh Gordon, it doesn't seem like, sustained trustworthiness is in the cards right now, and maybe they do change that. But I wouldn't say that their franchise is just going to automatically fix him. I think he's got to figure it out on his own.
Yeah, and it's never been about the talent between the lines when he decides to play. It's everything else. I mean, the reason the Browns finally cut him loose is because he was at the Browns facility late on a Friday night shooting a promotional video, got himself hurt, was late the next. I mean, they just nobody's been more patient with the Browns. Nobody had more incentive to be patient with Josh Gordon than the Browns, and he failed to live up to their muted standards. They muted their standards for this dude time and time again. and I'm sure there are a lot of people who want to say that, oh well, that's the Browns' fault. That's how they ran their operation, and that you get what you give. But it just the idea that Josh Gordon's just going to turn it around. I mean, if you're betting, you'd have to bet on him failing. If you're smart money.
And I was shocked at how many Browns fans blame the team. It seemed like a lot of people were more mad that they cut him or that they're trading him than at him for, not at him for being the way he is, but just understanding the situation that the Browns couldn't count on him anymore. And I keep bringing up as a Dolphins fan, but there just seems to be a lot of parallels between the two franchises. But I remember when Ricky Williams was going through all his stuff, that fans were pretty mad at Ricky for that. Like it wasn't like the team failed him. It was very much like Ricky put himself in that situation. So I've been shocked to see that, just how many people kind of side with Gordon. And I said this on Twitter, but I do think that we forget as sports fans that we don't have the whole story. Like, we think that the couple of nuggets that we get in the news is everything, and we don't realize that we're just not there every day. And I have to imagine there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. Like, him missing all of training camp, and the Browns clearly didn't really know that was all going to be happening based on their statements and stuff they put out when it happened. Like, that was probably a pretty big deal. And it doesn't seem that they really understood what was all going on there. And if he needed help, that's great. I'm glad he was going to get help. But it didn't seem like there was a lot of trust built up between Gordon and the team to handle it the way that it was handled.
Well, and we at Waiting for Next Year are not even part of the kind of really, really super connected, gilded media. I mean, we're on the side, and we are somewhat connected, and we hear things. So when you consider how much more we know that we can't say than Joe Fan, what does Dorsey know? Like what are the things that are going on inside Berea that they're going and using to make these decisions?
And Gordon has very clearly lied about many of the past issues that he's gone through, right? I mean, he downplayed everything publicly, and later the truth came out that it was much more than that. I mean, for a long time, everybody was making the argument that, he was barely blew over the limit, and the test samples were bad. And, then Gordon finally comes out with an article that pretty much says he has addiction issues and needs, help getting through them. And it's one of those where, all right, well, if he's lying just randomly to the public, what's he telling his bosses? And what other things are happening? And what other things are not getting out that they're having to scramble to figure out? And do you want the team to be supportive, and do you want the best for Gordon? Yes, of course. But we spent the first part of this podcast talking about how everybody wants Hugh Jackson fired, and you can't expect him to drop everything he's doing and lose his job over trying to figure out what Josh Gordon is going to show up that day.
Yeah. Well, and I was supportive of them giving him a chance and trying to get the most out of him, but now it certainly was time. They actually got something for him, and I don't even care if he does anything with the Patriots. It just doesn't. The Browns weren't going to get any more out of this guy, I don't think.
Yeah, I do think there's an element of that where what he does with the Patriots doesn't necessarily represent what he would have been able to do with the Browns.
It's so hard in sports because we just assume that whatever stats some guy puts up somewhere else, he could have had those 4 touchdowns with the Browns instead. Like, that's not how it works. It's not how it works. It's not relatable in that fashion, even though we kind of want to treat it that way.
Right, especially in something like this where this guy's going through something in his life, and he needs the support, and he needs to figure it out, and he needs to get through it, and he's got to do that on his own time. And a change of scenery might not be the worst thing. He's been with this franchise for how long? It hasn't been the most functional franchise, and he might just need a change of scenery in a place that has a more sound structure around it, and that might be the best thing for him.
Has it been like 6 years or 7 years?
It's insane. Like, we still talk about this guy. He's 23. Like, he's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
I saw something where he's played in 41 games and missed 41 games. Is that right?
I think so.
That's crazy.
So the Browns were 10th in games that Josh Gordon played for them. The team was 10-30-1.
Jeez.
So, I mean, what are we even talking about? And Ken Carman was getting killed for saying this on Twitter, but 31 other teams won games last year without Josh Gordon.
Yeah, he's not.
I know that's
the end of the world.
simplistic, but like that's the nature of the NFL, and it's I think it would be helpful if people would like really take that in.
It's also not like you're devoid of skill talent. Yeah, you've got Callaway looks good. You've got Landry. You've got Duke Johnson. You've got Njoku. Like it's not like you're sending him off and now your quarterbacks don't have anybody else to go to. There's plenty of other options. There's talent there. It's not you're not stripping that skill set from the team completely.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else we need to talk about? Because I think we've been going almost 40. Yeah, over 40 minutes now.
Time flies when you're having fun. No, I think we're both just writing out September, and then we'll have Indians hot takes once we get a little bit closer to October.
Yeah, and I'm not sure when we're going to talk again. There will definitely have been a Browns game by the time I talk to you next, though. So, yeah.
And hopefully a win.
We could be talking about the firing of Hugh Jackson and the benching of Tyrod Taylor. We could...
Baker Mayfield coming in at halftime and throwing 5 touchdowns in the second half. It's going to be great.
If Hugh Jackson really is coaching for his job, Baker Mayfield's coming in the middle at halftime of the Jets game. It's going to happen. See, and this is the problem. Like, this is why I say that if you bring back Hugh Jackson, he's got to feel like he's got the whole year, so that it saves his working relationship with John Dorsey, so that he doesn't make these rash decisions to try and save his job. You need him acting in a rational, long-term fashion.
Oh, yeah. And it's one of the hardest parts of tanking is that you have to hire a coach, but there's no way for a coach to survive a tank. And so you end up giving the coach an extra year or two after the tank's over because you're never going to be able to hire anybody else if you clearly just hired this guy to blow his record and then fire him. So you give a guy an extra year or two, and then by that time, you're halfway into the rebuild, and you should be performing better. So they're in a weird spot. Hopefully, he was just good. I mean, he had a lot of fanfare when he was hired. Maybe he's just good, and all that other stuff was just a symptom of the situation.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate your time, man. It's always fun to catch up and talk. Make sure you guys go on and give this podcast a positive rating on iTunes. We never ask you guys for that stuff, and I think
we ask for so little.
I think we've got 55 ratings in the. I know it's easy in the Apple Podcast app. You just like click through to the podcast page, scroll down, and give us 5 stars. Anything less than that, and I'll be really, really sad.
I'll cry.
So, thanks for listening, everybody. We will talk to you next time. It's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.